So
Attention gamers!
it's the end of the year, and it's this time of year that everyone comes out with their big self-aggrandizing list of the top 10 anime, the top 10 manga, top 10 movies, top 10 albums, top 10 sexual positions of 2019, top 10 TikToks, I don't know. What do people make top 10s of these days? You know, this year is a little bit special. It's a little bit different because not only is it the end of the year, it's also the end of the decade, you know, the 2010s. And so everyone's coming out with the top 10, 50, 100, whatever arbitrary number they decide, of the decade. And that's all well and good. I don't disparage people who want to reflect on the decade, because a decade is a long time. But there's exactly my problem with these kinds of lists, and where I have a lot of trouble making it. A decade is a fucking long time. The start of this decade, I was still in high school, which is crazy to think that high school 10 years ago, Jesus Christ. But the person I was when I was in high school is in many ways the same as I am now, but in a lot of ways very different from the person I am now. And particularly my taste in anime, my taste in movies, my taste in media has evolved and changed over time, that I don't know how I could make a list that truly reflected what I thought. What I liked in the 2010s has changed so much, because the 2010s is more than a third of my entire life. So if I was to make a top 10 anime list of the 2010s, if I think about at the start of the year, what was definitely one of my favorite anime was Madoka Magica. You know, it was one of the first seasonal shows that I watched as it was airing. I remember waiting week for week to watch it. And at the time, it was one of the first shows I watched beyond the sort of shonen space, you know. Like, I remember, too, like, being affected because the episodes were delayed because of the Tohoku earthquake happened. The last two episodes were delayed, and I remember that got me interested in reading about what was happening with the earthquake. That's how I actually found out about it. And that led me to, you know, researching the earthquake, finding out more about Japan, the socio-economic reasons behind the production of anime. It basically opened the door, right, for me to watch anime. And I was obsessed with this thing, you know, like, it was embarrassing. I was full otaku on this. Like, you know, I read the doujins, not even like sexy doujins. Like, it'd be less embarrassing if it was porn. It wasn't even porn. It was like dumb slice of life shit and like yonkama. I had like Pixiv pools bookmarked on my computer. I had t-shirts. It was embarrassing. So if I was to make a list at that time, without 100%, without a doubt, Madoka Magica would be on there. But when I think to now, it doesn't connect to me the same level, in nearly the same way, you know. I've just watched so much more anime. I've gotten to know, even though my Magical Girl knowledge is still not as large as I'd like it to be, I know more about it now to know that what Madoka did, while not unimpressive, it's not as revolutionary as I thought. And the ideas in it, you know, I can look back at it now and think the characters are kind of flat. They don't really have much depth to them. Its main focus is its plot, and that's definitely its main strength. And the animation is fine. There's bits of, you know, not so great stuff, but I can still like it, and it still definitely means something to me. But I don't know if I would put it on the best of the decade list. But is that a call that I can make? Is that a call the me of now can make, you know? Is a top 10 of the decade list supposed to reflect what I think now, looking back on everything? Or should it reflect what I was actually into? Should it be a gauge of the entire decade? Because for that initial, probably first third of the decade, it was one of the most important shows to me. Now we're in a different location, different environment, you know, just to spice things up a little bit. Totally not because my camera batteries ran out and the park that I went to was half an hour away and I couldn't be bothered going all the way back. So another thing is, if you consider, like, for example, my taste in movies and how what I look for in media just has changed. You know, when I started the decade, I was very definitely in the trope sort of mindset, you know? What I was interested in is I liked quirky, clever dialogue. I liked clever exchanges. I liked Tarantino esotericism, you know, very eccentric. I liked Christopher Nolan. I liked things like Primer. I like very complex, detailed, and playing with, quote-unquote tropes and conventions. That's what I thought was important. And then around about the middle of the decade, it shifted and I became focused on production, and it kind of became the opposite. I didn't like dialogue at all. I thought that if without any dialogue, it was much, much better in all cases, which is certainly not true. But yeah, it became focused on mood, atmosphere, how the presentation is used, how the cinematography tells the story, how the sound tells the story. And now, how I sort of approach media is I think, okay, what's it trying to do? What's the main point? I think about the lineage, like the environment the film was made in, how that influenced its point, its purpose. And so that encompasses a much wider range of things. That means I've returned to liking that quick dialogue, that Tarantino style, and I like mood pieces. And I suppose that's not a massive big revelation, but you can see how, like, even within that decade, that's changed what type of films I watch, what type of anime I watch. You know, like, in the middle of the decade, it was Enemy, Under the Skin, or Bust, The Witch. It was all these films, no dialogue, everything is just subtext and mood and depressing and bleak and awful. And I still like that, because the world is depressing and bleak and awful. But to make a complete list of the decade requires everything from that section. I've been trying to learn Japanese these past couple years, and all my research that I've come across has said that to learn a language, input is far, far more important than output, especially in the early stages. And I think that's not just true for language, I think that's true for opinions, for everything, because I can see in those three distinct sections of this decade of what I liked in media, the input I was receiving directly affected what I sought out. So at the start of the decade, most of my input was solely from the internet. It was things like, I have to confess a horrible, horrible secret. I used to go on TV Tropes. No, I went on TV Tropes, and all of the reviewers I watched seemingly were influenced by it too, and people just seem to think so much in this convention, this trope, this action. And I just thought that's how people approached movies, so that's what I sought out. And then in the middle of the decade, my university was very production-focused in my degree. So it was, sound, lighting, cinematography, editing, and so that was the input I was receiving, so that's what I thought was important. No, it didn't. The point has no matter, the dialogue has no matter, it's how it's filmed. That tells the story. Production tells the story. The medium is the message, to quote
Marshall McLuhan, a man whose name I could never forget. I'm a massive fan of his work.
Whereas now, a lot of the input I'm still getting those kind of inputs, because I still watch YouTube that is very trope-focused, I still look at videos that are about production. I'm always trying to better my production and learning about that. But also, too, I'm doing a lot more sort of free reading, not as much as I would like, but I'm definitely doing more than in university, because in university, there was the syllabus, but to me that felt boring because I was a dumb undergraduate who didn't care. Whereas now, because it's voluntary, because I want to read it, it sticks with me and I absorb it a lot more. I've been reading, I've read The Anime Machine, that was great. I've read Media Theory in Japan. And certainly, I have a lot more to read. It's only been a handful of books. That's some of the input I'm getting, and so that's what I start to look for. And so, like, the state of YouTube and AniTube, I think the problem comes down to people don't read. This is from someone who this year has only read 4 books, but that's more than a lot of people seemingly do, and people don't read, they don't read articles. I read a fair amount of articles. There's a kid pointing at me because I look like a fucking weirdo recording in a park in the middle of Nedima at 4 o'clock on a Monday afternoon. And another thing to consider with making the top 10 list is the media that's impacted me the most this decade isn't necessarily from this decade. Because the majority, especially with anime, the majority of the anime I've watched, and hell, even the majority of the films I've watched, are from older eras. I watched the classics. To give you an example, if I were to say the thing that I watched this decade that really impacted me the most, it would be Kino's Journey, 2003, Kino's Journey. I watched it in about 2013, and I can distinctly remember how I felt watching it. It was another one of those eye-openers, because before that, most of the anime that I'd been recommended was on the best-of lists, and they tended to be action-focused or very heavy and, serious, or the stakes were incredibly high. There's always some action going on. But Kino sort of fundamentally changed what I was interested in. That started a slow shift. I started seeking out, even just Googling anime like Kino's Journey, or I can't even remember exactly what I did. But, and I found things like, Mushishi, or, yeah, like I said, Nichijou-kei, Yashikei. I found more introspective, less focused on action and stakes, and it really opened my eyes to, the sort of mono no aware, the pathos of things within Japanese media. So I can very comfortably say Kino's Journey was what I watched this decade that impacted me the most. It's still my favorite anime. I don't know if that will ever change. But obviously it's from 2003. I can't say it's from this decade at all. So I can't put it on this list. So yeah, and this might be just how my brain is wired. I don't like absolutes. I don't like ordinal scales, like even if I made a top 10 list, I don't want to put like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Wow, you won't believe what's at number 7, because there's no value in that for me. Let's say, for example, like I put, something at number 8, and then someone comes into the comments and says, how could you put this at 8, but this at 5? 8 is so much better than 5. Because their own personal attachment is so strong, and they see just that base number, less than, and they think, oh, he thinks it's a lesser product, he thinks it's worse. And no, I could love them both equally, but just because there's this stupid ordinal scale everything apparently needs to fit in, people just assume automatically that I have an opinion that I don't have. That's part of the reason why I don't give scores in my videos, because they're not useful in critique. They're useful in cataloging. So on things like my anime list or Letterboxd, I give scores, but that's just a way to keep track of everything. Even within this year, my taste has changed. My life has changed a lot. Things have changed. And, what I felt at the beginning of the year might not necessarily reflect what I thought at the end of the year. People make these lists for fun. They make it to reflect and to celebrate what's come out. And I think that's good, because it's better than the alternative, the declinism of, oh, anime sucks now, anime is better. There's more anime now than ever before. More people are into anime now than ever before. And that's great. And even like with, same thing with films. Oh, only this era of film, the 70s is the best decade. The 70s had a deluge of crap, just like any other period of time. There are always good things and there are always bad things in regards to media. And so I like the positivity that these top 10s come out with. But I think the particulars of it are just stupid, and there's no reason to fret over that. At the end of the day, this decade was kind of rough for, I think, everyone involved except for billionaires. So much has happened. Most people I know, there's been a kind of a miserable year. And, where I'm at now, I don't know where I'm at now. I'm in Japan, and so I can understand why looking back on everything is just a nice way. People seek out media as an extension of themselves. Media reflects reality. Art imitates life, life imitates art, people imitate other art, people die, everyone dies. Happy New Year, Merry Christmas. It'd be really funny if I actually made a really half-assed top 10 list at the end of this
Body
week.
of Christ, sleep, swim, his body all mustered up and toned. Body of Christ, oh what a body, I wish I could call it my own. Lord Almighty, I've never been so enticed. Oh, I wish I could have the body of Christ. The body of Christ, the body of Christ, the body of Christ. Lord